Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Zach D Productions here, and I'm here for a movie review for you guys. So for this review, I will be reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which in my opinion is the weakest of all the Spider-Man films. I do think that this is the worst one. Now, I wouldn't call the movie awful or hot garbage or anything like that. It's not that bad, but compared to everything else, yeah, it's not really that great, especially when you compare it to all the other Spider-Man films. And I do think that this is the worst of them all, between the other one with Andrew Garfield and the Tobey Maguire trilogy and the Tom Holland trilogy. I do think that this is the weakest among all of those, actually. This is the second Spider-Man movie with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, and this would be his last portrayal of Spider-Man for a little bit, until No Way Home, of course, and after this, we were all expecting a sequel to this. Now, I remember very well during the era of this movie, a lot of people saying that the next movie would be called Sinister Six. Like, there would be this big villain team-up thing going on. Now, I do realize that the Sonyverse is a thing now as well, and, there's the movies with Venom and Morbius, and they're going to set up something with all these different characters. And I think, it could be cool, it could be kind of unique, So maybe the Sinister Six thing isn't really that far-fetched nowadays, Obviously, it's not coming as soon as we all thought it would, that's all, But yeah, I do remember the era of this movie, and I will admit that there was a time where I thought that this was one of the greatest Spider-Man films. Now, of course, I was younger then, but, I was a senior in high school when this movie came out, actually, so... Yeah, but, like I said, I don't think the movie is that bad. But, again, compared to all the other Spider-Man films, it's not really that great. But the movie is definitely a mess. It is, especially with some of the plot points, especially when it comes to the relationship between Peter and Gwen Stacy. They just seem so off and on with each other. Now, I know that can be real relationship issues as well, That's something that does happen, but I don't know. Just the way that they do it in this movie, it just doesn't really work that well, in my opinion. And I'm sure a lot of you would know what I'm talking about with that as well. It just doesn't really work, And also, there's some throwaway characters in this movie as well, like the Rhino that doesn't show up till like the end of the movie. And then there's the Goblin, who is played by Dane DeHaan, who is Harry Osborn and becomes the Goblin, but he doesn't become the Goblin till like towards the end of the movie, and that's basically it. He's only in the movie for like a very short bit. He wants to basically get revenge on Spider-Man because, he refused to help him cure his body because Harry Osborn basically got the same disease that his dad had, because apparently Norman Osborn in this universe was the Goblin as well, which we really didn't know much about before this movie. There just wasn't much with Norman Osborn, which is kind of weird. So he was a Goblin too, so did, Spider-Man ever fight him at one point, Similar to, how in the Tobey Maguire trilogy, how Spider-Man fought Norman Osborn before he fought Harry Osborn. And I do think that Dane DeHaan's portrayal of Goblin is easily the weakest among all the portrayals of Goblin. I do think that Willem Dafoe and James Franco's portrayals of the Goblin were much better than this. Much better. Easily the weakest, in my opinion, portrayal of the Goblin, but, he's there, whatever, and he obviously kills Gwen Stacy, and that is definitely one of the more emotional parts of this movie, probably the most emotional. And, I do like some of the more emotional parts of this movie. They are pretty gripping at times, but it's just kind of meh. Everything else kind of takes away from all the good things about the movie. I just feel like all the flaws really do overshadow, basically the main highlights of this movie, or, you know, the parts of this movie that I would consider good or decent at best. Now, Electro is one of the other main villains in this movie, and I will say that Electro is probably the best villain in this movie, but that's not really saying much because I think he's just okay at best. Now, in No Way Home, he was great. I thought he was really great in No Way Home, and his costume actually does look like, you know, the comic book Electro in No Way Home. What kind of Electro was in this movie? I don't know. That's something that I'm like, it's kind of laughable. You know, I don't like the Electro that much in this movie, you know? Because he's like all blue, you know, all, like he looks like he's like made of water or something, you know? Like when he becomes Electro, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Now, Jamie Foxx, he's a good actor for sure, and he's a good Electro. Like I said, I thought he was way better in No Way Home than he was in this movie. In this movie, like I said, I do think that Electro is the best villain in this movie, but still, he's not that great in this movie, you know? But it is what it is. Like, he's just all blue, you know? It just doesn't look like how Electro should, basically. That's just my opinion, though. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would understand that for sure. And one thing that is worth pointing out is Spider-Man's costume. I really like the costume in this movie. I think that this is not only the best Spider-Man suit for Andrew Garfield, but it might actually be my favorite Spider-Man suit out of any live-action Spider-Man film. I really do dig this suit a lot, and I always had. And it's kind of sad that, you know, the first movie where he uses this suit ends up being a flop. It ends up being the weakest of the Spider-Man films. But yeah, this movie, you know, it also has some plot points as well that involve Peter's father. Basically, he goes into these subway tunnels and he finds this lab in one of the subway cars, basically, and my thoughts on that, it's whatever, like, it's there, but maybe unnecessary. I don't know why, like, that whole thing needed to be a plot point, but the movie kind of is all over the place. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's as all over the place as Spider-Man 3 was from Sam Raimi, but it's still all over the place and not really well done, in my opinion. There are things to like about this movie, for sure. The action scenes, they're kind of fun to watch, you know? They're not all bad, but there are some moments where it's, like, kind of cheesy, you know? But overall, it's a okay movie, you know? So for a score, I'll have to give it maybe a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. I think it's honestly just a little bit above average. So that's my review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Again, it's just okay. It's an okay movie, but I do think it's the weakest of all the Spider-Man films. I even think the one animated film, Into the Spider-Verse, is better than this, but I'll talk about that movie as well. So, yeah, and I will do the rest of the Spider-Man reviews. Like I said, I'll review Into the Spider-Verse and also review the Tom Holland MCU trilogy, basically. And I know I did do a review for No Way Home already shortly after I saw it in the theater, but I'll probably do a re-review, you know, now that it's been almost a year since it's been released, so I figured now I can give you a more solidified review for it. But either way, that's my review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Let me know what you think. Do you actually like this movie? Have you seen this movie? Feel free to let me know. So on that note, thanks for watching. Have a good one.